Breaking news. Humza Yousaf is plotting a huge cut to help the Ukrainians who are fleeing Putin. A huge decrease to a proposal to help displaced Ukrainians settle in Scotland is allegedly in the works among SNP ministers, according to council officials. The government plans to cut funding for converting vacant homes into shelters for refugees. Mother initially thought she saw squirrels outside her window, but upon closer inspection, she decided to contact the authorities regarding the brutal cut. The leader of the Scottish Liberal Democrats, Alex Cole-Hamilton, MSP, stated when it came to the Ukraine plan, the Scottish government boasted in the media but fell short in practice. Local governments will face serious challenges in meeting the housing needs of the people displaced by Putin's war if they do not receive this crucial financing. In an effort to help the Ukrainian people flee their country following Russia's invasion, the Scottish government has provided funding for a number of programs. Among these, there was the £50 million Ukraine Long-Term Resettlement Fund, ULTRF, an initiative aiming to expand the inventory of available properties. As part of the plan, vacant houses will be renovated and Ukrainians will be housed for a period of up to 3 years. The allocation of approximately £23 million has been made, with 1,168 dwellings made available for Ukrainian immigrants, according to council papers. Since 2022/23, Record has received a document that claims budget changes to affordable housing will result in a reduction of the ULTRF fund to £5 million next year. If confirmed, this represents a huge cut and will limit the number of move-on properties available to meet the increased housing demand arising from the Ukraine schemes, said the author. In the past, ministers faced accusations of defrauding municipalities of funds meant to cover the costs of providing short-term welcoming accommodation, WA, for personnel. Last year, local authorities were informed just days before Christmas that they would not be receiving £10 million again. The document asserts that the Scottish government's decision not to grant cash to councils after they have legitimately incurred WA costs is completely unacceptable. Councils have accrued a deficit of costs related to supporting guests in WA due to the failure to reimburse WA activity costs incurred throughout 2023-24. The SNP ought to be embarrassed that their brutal cuts to local authorities are now going to affect individuals who courageously escaped war-torn Ukraine, stated Tory MSP Miles Briggs. Too many Ukrainian refugees are still living in inadequate or temporary housing because ministers overpromised and underdelivered on their super sponsor scheme. Councils have been continually shortchanged due to the SNP's financial mismanagement, and they are unable to satisfy the housing needs of the most vulnerable people. The buck stops with SNP ministers, and these cuts will be devastating news for those reliant on this program. Human rights in Russia have hit a post-Soviet low as a result of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which has resulted in death and devastation. The future of Russia is uncertain due to the war and Vladimir Putin's control over the country. War opponents face long prison terms as a result of government prosecutions. For many, the prospect of Russia transforming into a typical democratic nation that upholds human rights has long since faded. The Human Rights Report from Freedom House Russia under Putin is depicted in a gloomy light by Freedom House. The human rights organizations claim that the Kremlin manipulates elections and suppresses genuine dissent through its loyalist security forces, subservient judiciary, controlled media environment, and legislature comprising of a ruling party and pliable opposition fractions. With the invasion of Ukraine by Russian forces in February 2022, the government further restricted rights and individual liberties in an effort to quell domestic dissent. As a result, critics go to prison colonies while murderers walk free. Several high-profile incidents in Russia recently show an unsettling reality. The administration there is far more tolerant of killers than of those who speak out against Russian officials or the conflict in Ukraine. Anna Politkovskaya was a prominent journalist who covered corruption and war crimes in Chechnya for Novaya Gazeta. In 2014, her murderer, former police officer Sergei Kodzakurbanov, was sentenced to 20 years in prison. After serving his time and fighting in Ukraine, Kodzakurbanov was pardoned by the president. There have been similar instances. According to CBS News, there have been numerous cases recently where high-profile murderers, such as Vladislav Kanyas, who served less than a year of his 17-year term for the murder of his ex-girlfriend Vera Pektalieva, have been released after serving a fraction of their sentence while serving on the front lines, stated Russian media. According to reports, Kanyas subjected Pektalieva to hours of torture, during which she was stabbed 111 times and strangled with a cord. Advantages special to YOU after losing in the quarter-finals of the Copa del Rey to Athletic Club. FC Barcelona coach Xavi discusses the possibility of retiring. The Los Angeles Chargers have hired Jim Harbaugh, the head coach of Michigan. Boeing 737 MAX 9s can now fly again, thanks to FAA approval, but more production is out of the question. Russian authorities treat anyone involved in even the most nebulous forms of protest with the same callousness as they show toward murderers. Alexandra Skokolenko didn't anticipate that her actions at a St. Petersburg supermarket, where she exchanged price tags for statements denouncing Moscow's invasion of Ukraine and drawing attention to civilian casualties in the conflict, could result in her incarceration, stated the Moscow Times.